I'm John. Welcome to The Stammerer. This is a new podcast, and over the next few weeks, I hope to bring you some insight into the world of stammering and share some thoughts and some feelings and maybe some interviews. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of The Stammerer podcast. Episode 2 is called What's Your Name? Now, what does that refer to? That's referring to, as a stammerer, one of my, for sure, scary things to get asked is, hello, what's your name? Since a very young age, these 3 words have struck abject fear into my heart, because one of the key fundamental aspects of life is to talk to somebody and to introduce yourself as a way of being polite. Now, as a stammerer, and I'm sure many others in social situations have been asked many a year, what's your name? It's a simple question to be asked, and one which over the years has got me flummoxed, has put me into these really awkward situations whereby I've done everything not to answer that question, from bunking off school because I know that somebody has started school and you're going to ask to introduce yourself, or you get talks in school about career opportunities and you bunk off school because you don't want to go to the career day. And I didn't do the work experience at school because I pretended to be ill for 2 weeks, because the thought of going into a workplace and talking to people was just too much. All the way through to adulthood, where someone asked me my name and I just say it's John. Or another situation, this has happened a few times and I've never admitted this to anybody, where if I don't know the person and I'm not going to see them again, I change my name to something I can say, like Steve or Mark, which is absolutely ridiculous, whereby you can't even say your own name. And this is funny in some respects, but a primary form of communication for you to express yourself and for you to be comfortable and for you to be who you are, and you can't even say your own name. And many stammerers suffer from this, and I don't think people quite understand this. The from the heartbeat that pumps away, to sweaty palms, to the tapping of the feet, to some of the weird things that I do, like sneeze, and this is all to say my name. Now, I'm at a stage of my life, and I don't know where you're at, is that I am able to say my name. Sometimes I can say my name and it's absolutely fine. I can answer the phone. As long as I feel that I'm in control of saying my name, there is nothing worse for me than if somebody they ask a stealth question. So they ask me my name and I'm not expecting it. Sometimes I can just go, oh, it's John. And other times I seem to hang on, and I'm trying to say my name and I want to say my name. I know that I can say my name. And it's that waiting for those 3 seconds, 4 seconds, because it seems like an eternity until you can get the words out. So this is probably one of the reasons why stammerers hate the telephone. This is why stammerers find it really difficult to communicate, to introduce themselves. I truly believe that if a stammerer could say their name, even if they still had issues with fluency, if you could just say your name, if you could meet a person and say your name, that would just open up a whole new avenue of communication. And for a long time, it was a shame for me, and to admit this after such a long time, to not do things because I couldn't say my name. The embarrassment of being in the corporate world, and you've been able to have a meeting or host a client or talk on the phone, and you talk to your peers and you have those conversations because you are chilled, and you can have those, and then out of the blue, even up as far as some months ago, if somebody's new in the kind of office, then it takes me a little while to ask them, or speak to them, because for fear that they're going to ask me my name. And it's I can't express the relief when you finally get to say your name, and the embarrassment at times of when you can't. It's something that's so integral to our part of life. And there was a TED talk that I implore you to look for. There's a TED talk by a guy called Christopher Constantino, and he describes his stammering experiences. And this is probably the best way that I've ever heard of it being spoken about. And I won't be able to say it as eloquently as him, but he described it as, imagine the primary form of communication was pen and paper, and you communicate by you put your words down. Now imagine that there's a ghost in your hand, and you put some words down, but every so often your arm gets flicked. There's nothing you can do. You have no control over it whatsoever. There's a ghost in your hand, and you can write. You're absolutely fine, but every so often your hand will flick, and people can physically see your handwriting. People would know and can see, and probably be accepting of, because there's a physical action, and you can actually see the input. You can actually see where there's an issue. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way, our primary form of communication is speaking. Is we have to talk. We speak to each other, and in my opinion, that being able to speak fluently and eloquently are seen as, or we hold them in high esteem. This is linked to people who are smart and have high IQs, and these are the people that seem to get ahead. And my experiences overall of a stammer have been a positive one, mostly because I've tried to separate myself and try not to expose that part. However, the things I've seen and watched, there is still a stigma attached to stammering. So this primary form of communication that people hold in this high esteem, and you see these confident people, and you see them and they're talking and they're on the TV and they're acting and they're fluent and they're perfect. There is no representation for a stammerer. There is no representation for people who are not able to speak. And I guess that's kind of part as to the reason why I guess I've hidden it, is because I've always seen it as a weakness, as something to be ashamed of. How can I become a CEO, or how can I, have certain roles in life, in TV or in film or in somewhere where you want to speak, because I can't, because I'm not a fluent speaker. And for people that don't stammer, so imagine you want to speak, and there's many words that you love to say. Your vocabulary is great, and you want to talk. However, there are certain words you just can't say, or there's a structure of a sentence that you can't say. Like, for example, me, sometimes D's and G's, F's, S's. I literally have to psych myself up, and it's like trying to run up an escalator that is the wrong way. You're trying to get out. You're trying to sprint, to run up this hill, and you get to the top, and you think that you're nearly there, and you fall back down again, and you keep going, and you keep fighting, and you keep trying to persevere all this time. And all this time you are trying to speak, and you've got people around you, and you can feel yourself, and you can't get your words out. And it's tiring. It can be such a tiring physical action, and that's what it is. It's a physical, tiring action sometimes to physically speak. And over the years, and I can only speak for myself, is I find it such a drain sometimes. It's when you have to psych yourself up, and you have to it can physically hurt your mouth. It can make you so tired. You're focusing so much on speaking and everything we do. For the majority of my life, I wake up every single day, and the first thing I think about is a stammer. A stammer also becomes this all-encompassing affliction that you have, and there are people who have it worse. There are people that they have such a hard life, and they may hear this and think, okay, you only can't talk, and I sort of hold my hands up to that slightly. But when you have something that takes over your life, and it's something that you can't control, it's such a heartbreaking and difficult thing to explain to people. It's like, imagine standing there in a room full of people. There's a room of 100 people, and suddenly you lose your clothes, and you have nothing on. You're exposed. You feel exposed. When you are sat in a room of people, and anxiety builds up when you know that eventually you're in a room and everyone's introducing themselves and they say their names, and the anxiety and the your palms start to sweat, you start to sweat, and you know eventually it's going to come, it's going to be your turn to say your name. And it comes round and it comes round, and your anxiety, and at that point where everyone then turns to you, and that feeling of, you can feel yourself trying to get the words out, and there's a silence, and the room are staring at you, and you can feel yourself being hot. You can feel yourself, that embarrassment, your face becomes red, and it's a physical act where you're physically trying to get the words out, and you can't do it. Or if you can, the relief is such an endorphin rush for me, particularly if I am able to, because you get so anxious, you build yourself up. It's like playing sport. It's like, imagine yourself in a race, and the very start of that race, and you're there, you've trained hard, and you're about to just go, and your heart's pumping, and then the moment that they say go, and then you go, and there's nothing else that you can do. And that's what it's like. It's just being able to say your name is such a relief. And there's a question that I ask you is that, what are your experiences of instances where you've succeeded, where you haven't? I'd love to hear about your experiences of good and bad, of where you've been able to say your name or not. So one of the considerations I never thought about in regards to a name, your name is you. Your name is who. It's really important. Your name says who you are. It's you. It's your crest. It's your personality. It's you trying to be able to get that. And this is why a name is so important, because you're trying to establish yourself when you're already embarrassed and fearful. Just being able to say that name, and I never really thought about that until I got married. Now, I got married a couple of years ago now, and of all the stressful things, my wife, she did everything. So her stress was because she did it all. And my stress throughout the whole of the planning, through the whole of the months of planning, was nothing other than saying my vows and the speech. And for the longest time, I didn't want to propose, because I was so scared, because I didn't want to say I didn't want to do a wedding, because I was scared of speaking in front of people that didn't know that I stammered. So for the longest time, I just was just practicing. And now we're talking 2016, so seven years ago, and I remember just practicing, thinking I can't mess this up. And to a degree, the fluency, it was there, but when you're standing there, eyes upon you, and you have to say your vows to your wife in front of a camera. Now, there's a bone of contention is that speaking, so creating a podcast for me was a difficult thing to decide to do, because I hate speaking in terms of hearing my own voice. So when I have to edit all this and think about it, I have to listen to it back and listen to myself stammer and listen to my voice. Now, my wife, she was adamant on, she wanted a videographer there to, which is the correct thing, but so did I. But for a long time, I was just against the idea, because I didn't want to hear myself stammer. I didn't want the potential for me to be played over and over again, and being able to go to that point in the film and say, oh look, he's there. So reluctantly I agreed, because I wanted it and so did she. So we hired one, and we got to the vows, and for months I practiced and practiced and practiced, and I got to the vows, and I was able to pretty much get the vows out. It's not perfect, but I'm so glad that I practice, that I pushed myself for the first time in a long time. I pushed myself to rise to the challenge to speak. And it sounds ridiculous that on the wedding day, on your special day, that you should just want to have fun and have a good time. And once that part was over, it was just amazing. Now, that was short-lived, because obviously the speeches came and that was next. So I probably didn't enjoy the day until after my speech. And again, for months and months and months, practiced the speech. And we got to the speeches, and I don't know, and please, again, if you have any experiences, then please feel free to let me know, is that when you get into a situation where you have to talk and you kind of sort of know what you're about to say, but I find myself, if I'm in a situation where I feel stressed, words just go out the window, and I may have had a speech there, but my brain turns off and goes down a tangent and thinks about different things and forgets, because I'm trying to rush through the speech and, trying to just get through, and there's big pauses and whatever else. So I managed to get through the speech, but there were big key things that I managed to miss out, like saying to the bride how wonderful she looked and how amazing that she was, and she was amazing, and I loved her so much, which I still do to this day, but I wasn't able to say those things or just forget those things due to the stress. Now, the relief, once I passed the microphone over to the next person, honestly, sitting, just slumping in my chair, I was then able to enjoy the rest of the day. And just something as simple as saying your name and just being able to talk at a wedding and a pivotal point in your time is just, it's just something you don't think about. The other I guess part of stammering as well is that people, unless you tell people, and it's giving people the opportunity to, I guess, to see how they react, because a lot of it is, well, in my case, in my own mind, where I never gave people the opportunity to understand that I stammer, due to my experiences as an adolescent, where I did get chased and called names, and there are things that happened, but you learn to try to protect yourself. So your stammer becomes a protection, and you don't give people or let people in or give people an opportunity. So it's not a mistrust, but you don't give people that a fair opportunity to expose yourself. So potentially, I think one of the reasons why this is not in the mainstream is because a lot of people hide it. So maybe more people stammer than we think because we try to hide it. It's something that we try to hide, and it every few years or months there's something on the like the BBC or where there's a show about stammering, and you see people with belts on their chest, or you have these kids who really stammer, and then that's it for 2 more years or 3 more years. And I think people, as a stammering community or as a community where you want to help people, it definitely needs to be more in the media. People need to hear us. People need to hear what it's like to stammer. And we are just like you. We are just normal people who can't say some words. Thank you for listening. That was another podcast from me, John the Stammerer. If there is anybody out there who has a stammer or knows somebody with a stammer, please feel free to get into contact with me. I'd be happy to talk on the podcast, or happy to point you towards somebody that can help you. Also, there is an organisation called Stammer, and they are the British Stammering Association, who can help you, and there are loads of things on there that can help. There are many tips, advice, and if you wouldn't mind, could you please give whatever you can towards the organisation to help other people. Thank you, and as always, I will see you on the next podcast. Goodbye and take care.